Okay, grade 11s, we are back and we are going to look at the impact and challenges of contemporary socio-economic issues. Now guys, this is for me quite an interesting topic to do. Now as an introduction, I'm going to say that socio-economic issues have a huge impact on business operations. We have spoken in the previous section about the social component of the macro environment. Now this actually forms or falls in there. Right. The next one, businesses can lessen the impact by understanding them and the challenges that these socio-economic issues create. So therefore, we need to come up with possible solutions and strategies to deal with these issues. So it's in our best interest to understand the socio-economic challenges within our communities and the people that we sell to, the people that we get our labor from, so that we can better deal with the things that they find important or that hamper their progress in life. Right, the first one that we are going to look at is income. Now guys, when we refer to income here, we are referring to what impacts on people's spending power. Now you can see the picture that I've got there is about poverty. Now guys, a large portion of our society live in poverty, and as I've said earlier, if people live in poverty, that is less money available. There's the people, but less money available to spend on our products and services. So therefore, guys, it is in the business's best interest to get involved in the community in which they live, to try and uplift these people, give them a better chance of making a good living so that they can earn more of an income, so that they can eventually spend that money on our products and services. Now guys, also, if you look at the environment on that picture, you can imagine things like the degradation of people's livelihoods. You can think of disease, you can think of crime and all of those things that go with it. Now guys, that is a big problem in businesses, because if there's crime, of course that impacts directly on our products and services, our money, because we need to spend a lot more money in terms of security and things like that. Okay, also disease. If you look at those communities, our laborers come from those communities. And if they don't have money to sustain themselves, that means that we are going to get a depleted workforce, and those people will not be able to work productively. So guys, I've put a word there for you, inequality. And inequality refers to the differences between those that have money and those who don't. Now guys, at the moment there's a large amount of discontent in the country because so few people have a lot and a lot of people don't have any. So what do you think the relationships in the country is going to be like if that situation is allowed to continue? It is simply not sustainable. So therefore, businesses have a role to play in also uplifting people out of poverty. Right, the next question that I've got there, or the next fact that I've got there, is inflation. Now you guys, you can see we've spoken about inflation in the previous section. You can see the rat eating the money. That means that the money is there, but it's getting less and less. The value of that money is getting less and less over time. I always say to my kids, when I grew up, my parents used to buy groceries with 20 rands, and that filled up the car's boot. You couldn't fit anything more in for 20 rand. Now guys, 40 years down the line, 20 rand will buy you a Coke and maybe a chocolate or milk and bread, not even milk and bread. And that's what you can get for 20 rand. So that is how the value of the money, of the buying power of that money has decreased. Now guys, you can imagine why this is a socio-economic issue. Inflation hits people in the pockets. If the inflation rate increases higher than what people's salaries increase, it means they are actually getting poorer in terms of their buying power, and that means they have less money available to spend on our products and services, because they need to spend a large amount of money on electricity and things that has gone up, and that money eats away on their disposable income, the money that they have left over to spend on products and services. Right, the next one that we've got there is social cultural and demographic issues. Now, if you can see the picture there, the picture refers to a lot of different people, different genders, different races, different religions. Now, guys, in our societies, unfortunately in South Africa today, there are still issues of sexism, of racism, people being excluded from economic activity just because they are from a different race or a different culture or even a different religion. Now, guys, the impact on that is that within our workforce, all of these different people are there, and that creates tension within our workplace. So therefore, we need to actually educate people to become more tolerant towards one another. And in our code of conduct, we must actually pertinently state there that we do not tolerate any racism, any sexism, etc. Right. The next socio-economic issue that we can see there is you can see a guy reaching out of the computer screen and taking your wallet. Now, guys, that is called cybercrime. It's obviously it doesn't work like that, but people use or copy our internet passwords and our banking passwords, hack our systems, and then they use that information that is stored on us to either do identity theft. With other words, they can go and open up accounts in our name, which we don't even know that we've opened. They buy a load of things, and we are responsible for paying it back. That is identity theft. Or it could be people really emptying your bank account. Now, guys, I can tell you now, the banking sector spends an exorbitant amount of money each year trying to curb cyber attacks on their servers and things where people can lose money through these types of events. So economic crimes is a reality in South Africa, and as the internet and we become more dependent on the internet, this becomes a lot more prevalent. Now, guys, very important to note, economic crime as a definition means those types of crimes where we don't use violence or intimidation, but rather fraud or deception or things like that. So that is what that means. Right. The next one is illiteracy. Now, guys, illiteracy literally means that people cannot read or write. Now, guys, you can imagine if you go to Pick n Pay and you want to be a clerk or the person that's on the till, you will not be able to do that job if you cannot read or write. There are very, very few jobs that people can do if they cannot read or write. So therefore, businesses are very reluctant to hire people that are illiterate. Illiteracy and poverty runs together. People that are illiterate are also poor because they cannot find employment. So if you can see in that example, in that picture, that is a school that is set up for adults to learn, to teach adults to learn to read and write so that they can fully participate in the economy of the country. Right. The next one is corruption. Now, guys, for all of you that follow the Zondo Commission inquiry on state capture, that clearly only deals really with corruption. So it's a nice example to use anything that comes from the Zondo Commission as examples for corruption. Now, what is corruption? A person in power abuses that position to get kickbacks or some or other form of compensation for doing normal jobs. For instance, there's let's say the government wants to build a road. Of course, governments do not build roads. Group 5 projects do, or any other civil engineering company, they build roads. But in order for the civil engineering company to get the contract or the tender, they will give the official in charge of making that tender happen something under the table, a bit of money that we deal to them or buy them a car or whatever, and then all of a sudden we get the tender of a couple of million rand in order to build the road. Now, guys, that is corruption, and corruption is a massive problem. If you look at what's happening at Eskom, SAA, all of those funds were drained from those businesses, and they are actually not going concerns in the normal sense of the word, because there's no money. The money was literally stolen. Right, that is corruption. The next one that we've got is ethical misconduct. Now, guys, the moment that you see the word ethics, it refers to what is right or wrong in the eyes of the community or the society. Now, you can see there I've got a direction board there that says right way, wrong way. The moment that you see the word ethics, it refers to our morality of what we perceive as being right or wrong. Okay, so ethical misconduct involves, and later on in the presentation we specifically speak about ethical misconduct, refers to anything that has to do with morality. And I want to leave it a bit until we get to that section of work. The next one is lack of skills. Now, guys, just so by the way, South Africa is probably one of the least productive nations in the world. And the reason why we are probably has got a lot to do with lack of skills. We do not foster enough skills into our people. Now, Mr. de Klerk, this is actually a nice conversation point. We have an unemployment rate of, well, now 30% plus, and the extended thing almost 40%. Now, what I want to know, do you really think it has just got to do with Corona or a bad political environment or whatever, or what do you think might be the reason?
Well, all of these socio-economic issues will have a role to play in that, but specifically lack of skills will also play a role in that, because if you don't have skilled people, you're not going to be producing at an optimal level. You're not going to be producing at your maximum output at your cheapest rate, which means that when you're sending out a product into the market, it could actually be sent out at a cheaper rate, which means it becomes more affordable. When it becomes more affordable, more people have access to it. It's just a cycle that is just beneficial for the country. But a lack of skills could also prevent that from happening.
That's correct. Now, what we have in our country, and that's out of the scope of this presentation, but it's nice additional information to know. We have 3 different kinds of unemployment: cyclical unemployment, seasonal workers that now have a job, and when the season ends, they are unemployed. Those are normal cycles. The other one is cyclical unemployment. As the economy grows, and economies around the globe grows and goes down, and in the downward phase, they retrench people, but then they hire again. Those are normal cycles. Our unemployment is the dangerous one, and that is called structural unemployment. And the reason why it's called structural, it's the structure of the economy doesn't make provision for people with low skills to take the job opportunities that there are. There are job opportunities available. We just do not have the people that can actually take up those job opportunities.
And the problem with that is, if that job needs to be done, we have to employ someone. So we then have to employ someone from another country.
Exactly.
And let's say they're from a country in Europe or America where the value of their dollar or euro or whatever they are using is so much more. We have to spend so much more money to be able to get them here to do the job. Whereas if we had the people here, we could firstly employ those people, secondly at a cheaper rate.
Exactly. Now also what happens is maybe a nice point to discuss. On lack of skills, for example, now we have less people in the country that can take up the jobs that we require skills for, the engineers and the doctors, the accountants, those people. So less and less people have the skills to take up the opportunities, and because they are scarce, if there's scarcity, the value goes up. So what happens now? Those people that do not have the skills are now kind of in oversupply, and we know from economic cycles how that works. If that's an oversupply, those people will not be able to bargain for better salaries, whilst the few that have the skills and can make use of the opportunities getting paid more and more and more. And that basically means the inequality gap
gets
is
bigger and
widening
bigger,
all the time.
Yep.
So that's an interesting point of thought. Right, the next one, of course, are strikes. You can see that The people striking in the picture demands a wage increase of 8.5%. Now, guys, strikes have a very bad impact on businesses because when people are striking, they're withholding labor. It means we cannot produce as a business, and therefore we are losing money all the time because if we can't produce, we can't sell. Right. So the next things that we are going to look at, remember I told you that the ethical misconduct we will do in this section of work, there are specifically 3 types of unethical conduct. And if you see this in a question paper, they say to you, list 3 types of ethical misconduct. It is these 3 that they are looking for. The first one is sexual harassment, and as the picture there suggests, it's quid pro quo. Normally with sexual harassment, it works like this. A person in power demands sexual favors from a subordinate in order to give them a raise or a promotion or whatever. So they're abusing their power as the person in authority to get something out of that person. Now, guys, sexual harassment as a definition says it's any unwanted sexual attention. So with other words, in this case, the lady didn't ask for that sexual or attention that she's receiving. It could be a wolf whistle, it could be somebody touching you, it could be just general remarks. And the fact is, it undermines that person's human right to dignity. And that makes those people very, very uncomfortable. And oftentimes, very productive people leave the business because they are also reluctant to report it because they feel victimized. So that is a thing that is very prevalent in our country, and I can promise you, guys, if you make yourself guilty of sexual harassment, that's the first, and you will be fired from that position so quickly it won't even matter if you were there. Right. The next one is mismanagement of funds. Now, guys, you can see I chose a picture of Steinhoff. Now, as an originality mark, there was quite a number of articles now recently in this year regarding still the Steinhoff saga. Now, basically what happened there, they specifically withheld correct information from their shareholders and all of those people, the true value of the books, and that means people made investments into a company that they didn't actually know the full extent of because they used deception to basically cook the books. Now, guys, that is a form of mismanagement of funds. Also, if you look at the Zondo Commission now, you will also see that many of the issues that they are dealing with are money that has just been lost from government institutions and parastatals that has just gone missing. And that means there's no internal control mechanisms to see where the money is going. And that drains the funds of a business very quickly to such an extent that they cannot deliver the service that they are meant to deliver. Right, so that is mismanagement of funds, the unlawful management of finances. The next one, of course, is corruption. I've already dealt with corruption, so I'm not going to speak about corruption again. Now, guys, the next one is a different socio-economic issue, and that is the concept of piracy. Now, many of you know what a knockoff product is. A Gucci bag, for example, that looks exactly like a Gucci bag, but it is not a Gucci bag. It is made by a cheap manufacturer using sweatshop labor in order to produce those bags. They look exactly the same, but it's a knockoff product. So basically what happens is they stole the intellectual property of the original creator of the bag. And therefore, that original creator is losing revenue and income because other people are selling the exact same thing as what they came up with. So that is a very big problem. Now, guys, many of you walk with earphones in your ear and you are listening to music that you've downloaded from the internet. And many of those downloaded music is also a form of piracy because the original creator of the work gets no royalty fees on it. So therefore you are stealing their income. So that is basically what piracy is.
Another more relevant example, and I see it and I hear when chatting to the kids in the class, they're always telling me about this website showing these movies, the latest movies, and then next week you see that site has been shut down, another one's been opened up. So that's a massive form of piracy where the companies or people are creating websites where you can watch all the latest movies that are currently still showing, movies that are coming out, and the people that actually invested time and money in making that movie are not getting any form of royalties.
Any form of royalties of the product that they actually sell.
So they're not going to maximize their income, so a lot of them might actually lose out.
Yes, and the impact of that is exactly the same as walking into Pick and Pay and taking products and stuffing it under your shirt and walking out. It is exactly the same thing, and you will see there the impact on the screen there. The impact driving up prices is exactly the same as any other theft. Because I'm losing money, I need to make that money up somehow. So I'm increasing the product's price in order to make up for the loss of income. The next one is loss of income because they don't receive royalties from those products. It also damages the value of that business because there are many, many of those products out there. So the demand for their businesses' products are also waning. And then the next one, of course, if that situation continues and that it continues losing income, then they will start retrenching people. So therefore, there are job losses. Right. Now, guys, obviously there must be ways to deal with piracy. Now, if they ask you to discuss 3 ways, they won't ask you to discuss 3 ways because then it means it's going to be a 9-mark question. So let's say 2 ways. You must only refer to any of these 3 things in the grade 11 curriculum. The first one is a copyright. Now, guys, a copyright refers to written work that you get the sole right on to distribute and copy and make available. That is called a copyright. The next one is a patent. This is more for products that you have made that uses a unique way of working or functioning, and then you acquire a patent, and it gives you for a limited period of time the sole right to manufacture that product using that technology. That's a patent. And the next one is a trademark, and you can see the R in the circle. That refers to a trademark. That is any symbol or slogan or whatever that they use to separate one business from the other, or the products of one business from the other. I always use the example of Coca-Cola. If you look at a Coca-Cola bottle, the word Coca-Cola, the name Coca-Cola is written in a specific font. The red ribbon is a trademark of Coca-Cola, and even the shape of the bottle is a trademark because it separates Coca-Cola from any other cold drink out there. So that is what you can do. And how does it work with piracy? Guys, those things are protected by law. So therefore, if a pirated product comes onto the market, they use the same trademark and symbols and things, that means those people are stealing from you, and that is a criminal offense. Right. Now, guys, just to make it easier for you to understand the differences between a trademark, a patent, and a copyright, you guys need to be able to distinguish between these three things in a case study. There's an example of a vacuum cleaner. The trademark, the name of the product is Megavac. That is the trademark, the name of that vacuum cleaner. The patent is how Dr. Ludwig made the vacuum cleaner. The technology that it used is patented. And then, of course, the copyright is the advert that they placed on TV, the written part, the intellectual part of it. That is the copyright. Right. Guys, the next section of work, it also falls still under socio-economic issues, but now we are going to look at industrial relations. Now, guys, what is industrial relations? It refers to the relationship between labor or the workers and employers. So that is industrial relationships between employers and by extent then the unions and employers, and by extent then employers' organizations, and how they they work with one another. Now, guys, you can see there is a picture of a guy with 2 buttons, conflict and resolution. Labor relations is all about finding the balance between the conflict and the resolution that is beneficial to both parties, either the employer or the employees. Right. Now, guys, the act that governs the industrial relations in our country is called the Labor Relations Act, or in short, the LRA. Now, guys, you would see that I've got a load of different bullet points there, because in grade 11 you need to be able to discuss the purpose of the Labor Relations Act. Now you can see I've highlighted or bolded certain parts of the words, and that will just make it easier for you to remember. Now guys, please don't go and remember 5 or 6 of those bullet points. The question will never count that much. I would go and remember 4 that makes the most sense to you. So right, let's go with the first one. It says provides a framework or structure. Now we need to say for what? For labor relations between employers and employees. So that's your statement and your qualifier. Provides a framework is a statement. Now you need to say for what? For labor relations between employers and employees. The next one, promotes collective bargaining. Now guys, collective bargaining is a very important concept that you guys need to know quite well. Now collective means a load of people. That's the collective. It's not just one employee trying to bargain with his employer for better wages or working conditions or whatever the case may be. Collective bargaining means all of us as workers in an entire industry will bargain with our employers of a particular industry all together, collectively, and that we call collective bargaining. Now, when there's a decision reached or a deal struck between the employers' organizations and the trade unions, then that deal, that bargaining outcome is then binding on all parties within that industry, not just one business. Now that we call collective bargaining. The next one promotes workplace forums. Now guys, a workplace forum is a structure created by the Labor Relations Act, which needs to be installed in a business that has 100 or more employees. And basically what it means is workers, and they don't have to belong to a trade union, elected workers form part of the decision making in the business, a structure that make joint decisions with management of a business. So that is a way to include employees in decision making, and that is a workplace forum. Right. The next one establishes labor courts. Now guys, labor courts, you can see the picture that I've got there is of a gavel, and that is normally used by a judge. A labor court is the court that looks at the dispute between employers and employees, makes a judgment call based on the law, and that is then binding on all parties there because they are the law. Right. The next one promotes fair labor practice between the employers and employees. Guys, fair labor practice refers to not dismissing people unfairly, not treating people unfairly in terms of their working conditions, paying them fair wages. These are fair labor practices. And then the last one establishes the Commission for Conciliation, Mediation and Arbitration, and that is the CCMA. They almost work like a court, but they are not a court of law. If there's a dispute between an employer and employee, then they can take the matter to the CCMA, and the CCMA at the last resort will go through an arbitration and then make also a judgment to say you are right, you are wrong, but it's binding unless people want to still refer it to a court. It's just a much cheaper, faster process to do it through the CCMA. Right. Now guys, when we speak about industrial relations, you cannot speak about industrial relations without referring to trade unions. Now, I've got an example of a trade union there for you, the South African Transport Allied Workers Union, or SATAWU. These are for people that work within the transport sector. Now, guys, every sector in the country has a trade union that looks after the interest of those specific workers. You can think of NUM, the National Union of Mine Workers, or the NUMSA, the National Union of Metal Workers South Africa, all the people that work with metal. Now, guys, these are different sectors in our economy, and these trade unions represent workers within that specific sector. Now, these guys, of course, is in the transport industry. So what is a trade union? It's an employee organization. It's controlled and managed and paid for by its member, and they then elect shop stewards at floor level, workplace level, that actually works for that business, that represents the workers in that business with the trade unions. Right, Mr. de Klerk, you can please move on for me. Right, the next is the role of trade unions. Now, guys, you mustn't be confused here. You are going to get roles of trade unions. If the question asks you to discuss the roles of trade unions, then you would answer in this form. If they ask you the functions of trade unions, that is the one that just follows this. So what are the roles of trade unions? Now, guys, the role of trade unions in South Africa has actually broadened far wider than only looking at employment issues or just representing workers in terms of wages and wage disputes and things. They are a force that also deals with things like poverty reduction, changing the economy or the structure of the economy so that it favors the working class. And as I've mentioned earlier in the session, trade unions are also part of government in the form of COSATU, that's part of the tripartite alliance. So they are much more than just looking after the interest of workers. They are also a political force to reckon with. Right. Now, Mr. de Klerk, I think we can move on. The next section that we are going to do is business sectors, and I'm going to hand you over to Mr. de Klerk.
All right, grade 11s, we're now moving on to the next section of work, which, as Mr. Van Zyl said, is business sectors. And they obviously consist of three sectors, which we have been covering since grade 10. So you should know this work, or most of this work already. But the primary sector, we know, is responsible for extracting the raw materials or natural resources from the earth. The secondary sector, we should know, they process all the raw materials. So all the raw materials that was extracted in the primary sector, they process all those raw materials and create finished products that will be used by the end user. And then the tertiary sector, also known as the services sector, will render services and sell goods and services to individuals or to other businesses as well. Okay, so those are the definitions of the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. But like I said, you should know this from grade 10 already. This is just a quick recap. But what's also important to know is what type of activities form part of the business sectors. So if we look at the primary sector, the types of activities that take place would be fishing, mining, farming, and forestry. Okay, so those are the different industries that form part of the primary sector of South Africa, at least. Okay, so we've got a fishing industry, we've got a farming industry, we've got a mining industry, as well as forestry. So all the businesses involved in those industries are responsible for extracting all the raw materials that will be used in the secondary sector. Okay, then the activities that form part of the secondary sector would be, for example, electricity provision, water provision, manufacturing, and construction. Okay, so these are all, and we can actually see in all the pictures that it's a process that's happening. Okay, so it's a process of manufacturing cars, it's a process of constructing a business, and obviously electricity and water is something that is continuously produced. For example, the electricity used to light up or to power the television can't be recycled. Okay, so this electricity, once it's been used up, it's gone, it's used forever. So it's a continuous process of manufacturing electricity. So those are the activities that take place in the secondary sector. And there are a lot of activities that take place in the tertiary sector or the services sector. So I've just listed a few of them, which are the retailers, wholesalers, banks, insurance companies, transportation, tourism, and hospitality industry. So those are just a few examples of businesses that form or activities that take place in the tertiary sector. All right, but grade 11s, what's very important for you? So we know the definitions of the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. We know from grade 10 what activities form part of the three sectors, but what's very important here is for you to be able to make the link between the different sectors. So how are these sectors interrelated? So you can see I've designed a Venn diagram, which is something we should have learned already or will learn later in the year. So a Venn diagram basically shows the different parts of the whole, but it also shows that they are interrelated, so they depend on each other. So all of these sectors, the primary sector, the secondary sector, and the tertiary sector, they cannot operate independently. Okay, so without a primary sector, there cannot be a secondary sector or a tertiary sector. Without a tertiary sector, there cannot be a primary sector and a secondary sector. So all of these sectors are interrelated, so they work together, and they're also dependent on each other. So they depend on each other to have a purpose. If you think about it, whatever we are extracting from the earth, so for example, if you like eating sushi or you like eating at a fish restaurant, those fish that was used to make your food had to come from the primary sector. But if there was nobody demanding fish, then the fishing industry wouldn't have a purpose, which was to catch fish. So if nobody demands fish, then that sector or that industry of fishing will close down. Okay, but because there are people that demand fish products, that demand creates a need in the primary sector. So that demand will determine how much fish needs to be extracted to meet the demand of the people that's created in the tertiary sector. And obviously that fish will be processed either into canned fish or into other ways that the fish is then manufactured into different products, and that happens in the secondary sector. So so all three sectors are interrelated, and you need to explain how these three sectors are interrelated and how they actually depend on each other. Okay, so the way you explain that is by explaining that the goods are extracted in the primary sector, but how they are extracted is determined by the demand that's created by the tertiary sector. Okay, and then once they are extracted, they obviously have to go through the manufacturing process, which takes place in the secondary sector. And then once that product has been finalized, you wouldn't make a product just to leave it there. You want to make a product or service to sell it to somebody. So then that sale of that product or service will then happen in the tertiary sector. Okay, so as far as the business sectors go, it's a short section of work, but you need to be able to differentiate between the three different sectors, primary, secondary, and tertiary sector. You also have to know which activities form part of the primary, secondary, and tertiary sector, but most importantly, you need to be able to explain the interrelationship and the dependency of each of the three sectors on each other. Okay, so that is the end of the business sector section. Like I said, very, very short. And I think we're going to leave it there because unfortunately we don't have enough time to cover all the topics in this session. And we won't be able to finish everything now, but I think we've covered quite a few topics quite extensively.
Yes.
We've covered everything within those topics, which is quite a task in the limited time that we have available. But thank you to Mr. Van Zyl for your knowledge and for compiling things and making sure that the process runs smoothly.
Thank you very much, Mr. de Klerk. As I say, it's fun to do something different than just the grade 12 work. Mr. de Klerk, maybe it's a good idea because this is a recording. They would have the ability to pause.
Yeah.
So the section that we've got there, the benefits and challenges of setting up a company, is a very, very difficult section of work. I know from last year's exam, which I was a senior marker for grade 12, they struggled with that section of work because it's quite technical. So I think it might be a good idea if you just want to flash them, because it's not just pictures, it's more content-driven things. So maybe just to flash whatever is on the presentation, so that you guys can take notes or pause or whenever you are
And then
ready.
when you do watch this recording, make sure that you just pause the video and you can actually see what's on there. It's quite a detailed set of information on the benefits of and challenges of setting up a company. So let's just quickly scan through them. So we have the legal status and the liability of the different forms of ownership. We have the way that profit is shared between them amongst the different forms of ownership with the benefits and the challenges. We have ownership and management between the different forms of ownership with benefits and challenges. These are, of course, also the advantages and disadvantages. The capital and cash flow requirements for starting the different types of businesses.
Mr. de Klerk, maybe it's also important when they read this and you go through your work, please know that your benefits and challenges are also relative to other forms of ownership. The other forms of ownership that are not companies are things like your sole proprietor, partnership, CCs. So always see it as a way of looking at it in relation to what you would get if you had a partnership or a sole trader.
That's probably the best way to learn this work, is to compare the different forms of ownership.
Compare it, yes.
Because then you're really getting an in-depth knowledge of what makes up the different forms of ownership.
That is correct.
Okay, just to scan through, we also have to look at the lifespan and continuity should one of the people involved in the business either choose to leave or pass away. We have to look at the tax implications on the different types of businesses. So we have challenges and benefits as well, because this can also help you to determine what type of business you want to run depending on the amount of money you're going to earn or profits you're going to earn, and then the tax on that profits as well.
Then, Mr. de Klerk, on this section that you see here, the formation of a company is really restricted only to grade 11 work. All the previous ones that you have now seen form part of the grade 12 curriculum, and if you know this in grade 11, you will do yourself a big favor when we get to grade 12. So please know this work or the previous ones very, very well. This, of course, is for grade 11, really important.
Okay, so when it comes to the formation of the company, you need to know the steps in setting up a company, and there's quite a nice list of complete set of steps for you to follow. You need to know the legal requirements of the name.
Guys, you can also see here there's you had in your booklet, you had to fill in, there's a little a questionnaire there where you had to fill in the missing words. So you can get those missing words from looking on these slides just to mark your own work for you.
Then we have the memorandum of incorporation for when you're starting a company. Notice of incorporation. A prospectus for people who might want to invest in your company. There's a list of information of what is contained in that prospectus, because remember, the prospectus is the way that you're going to advertise your company, and this is what you're going to use to motivate people to invest in your company. And if you don't have a good prospectus, you're also going to motivate them not to invest in your company. So this is something you should spend a lot of time on. Then you'll have your initial public offer versus the secondary public offer as well.
Mr. de Klerk, maybe you can hang on to this slide quickly. This is only for grade 11. You have to be able to differentiate between an initial public offering, an IPO, and a secondary public offering or an SPO. So I want to just maybe spend a bit of time. Guys, when you issue shares for the first time, it's the first time that the company is trading and the shares are issued on the JSE. This is the first shares that you issue. So when people buy these shares, it is a business's own capital. It's like the owners giving you money. But guys, after you have sold the shares to private investors, they can then sell these shares to whoever they want. And that money that comes from the secondary offer is going into the pockets of the people who actually bought the shares from you. That is the secondary public offering. A secondary offer is an offer of securities by a shareholder of the company as opposed to the company itself. Okay, so when the shareholder sells its shares, then of course the shareholder will receive, in any case, the money that he is asking for that share because it's his asset.
Right, and then grade 11s, the last section of work that we would have covered today was avenues of acquiring a business. So these are different ways that you can basically start a business that's already existing or getting involved with a business that's already existing.
And that's also only for grade 11.
Also only for grade 11 years, so it won't
Yes.
carry on into the grade 12 year. And those ways is franchising, outsourcing, and leasing. And I'm just going to quickly go through each of those avenues of acquiring a business, because you must know a description or a definition of franchising, outsourcing, and leasing, and also the advantages and disadvantages, as well as the contractual implications. Okay, so there we have the description of what the franchise is. And on the next slide, we have the advantages with the green tick, and we have the disadvantages with the red cross. And these are the advantages and disadvantages for the franchisee. It's very important to know the difference between a franchisee and a franchisor. Okay, so the franchisee is the person or the people that are going to be buying the rights to use the name of an existing company. So these are the benefits of the people that will actually be managing the company or the business. Okay, so you need to know the advantages and disadvantages of the franchisee, as well as the disadvantages and advantages of the franchisor. Then there we have the description for outsourcing, right? Basically paying another business to perform an activity which you could have actually done yourself, but you prefer another company to do it for various reasons. We have the advantages of outsourcing, which you should be able to explain, as well as the disadvantages of outsourcing.
And look out for the type of question that says explain the impact or discuss the impact. Then you can either respond positively or negatively, like this. So that is also important. Discuss the impact means disadvantages and advantages.
Yeah. And you can obviously decide what to write depending on what your knowledge base is. Okay, and the last thing is what is leasing. Right, so you need to know what you need to be able to give a description of leasing. And then again, you must know the difference between a lessee and a lessor. Right? And you need to know the advantages and disadvantages, firstly for the lessee, and then the advantages and disadvantages for the lessor. Okay? But be very careful when you read a question, should it come up and they ask you to explain the impact of a lease on the lessee or the lessor, make sure you know who you are going to be responding to. Are you responding from the perspective of the lessee or from the perspective of the lessor? Okay, grade 11s, thank you for taking time to watch this. Hopefully we've provided you with a lot of information and a lot of good information and a lot of examples. We've covered almost the entire term's work in just about a 2-hour session. But thank you for your time and good luck for the rest of the year. Thank you, Mr. Van Zyl.
Thank you, Mr. de Klerk. Thank you very much, guys, and I hope you found this to be helpful to you.
Bye-bye.